also in the room or just the live stream? Like the voice. Okay. I don't have to. Yeah. No. Okay. Good. Okay. Hello. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you all for coming. My name is Tom Borgers. I'm the founder and CEO of 3Mint. We build Web3 tools for brands, really enabling brands to use NFTs, distribute them, etc., while removing a lot of the complexity it takes to deal with Web3 and NFTs. So today what I want to do is kind of review a little bit where we stand with NFTs, where the market is, and really ask ourselves the question of what comes next and what fundamentally are NFTs good for, right? So context is everything. So let's start by steeping ourselves in a little bit of data to kind of ground us in this conversation, right? So you can see here on the chart basically the whole NFT market since its inception, roughly. You can see in orange, that's actually the transaction count volume, and in white, that is the USD value volume, right? And you can kind of bookend this with the CryptoKitties spike here on the left at the end of 2017, and on the right here, the Other Deed land sale. And so when we look and double click into this volume, there's kind of three broad categories that come to the fore, right? Three main buckets of activity, being PFPs, gaming, and art. And when you double click further, you really see that it's PFPs that have dominated, especially in this top 50 collections, right? Accounting for about 2/3 of the volume, with gaming coming after that at about 1/3. And you can kind of see the top 10 here, some very familiar names. And in here, I'm including things like NBA Top Shot in the gaming category, right? So the big question for us when we think about NFTs is what really motivates the purchasing and the volume that we see in the NFT markets. Why do people go out and buy NFTs? And we would posit that it's really these three key ingredients. Number one, status signaling. So I buy something and I want to show it off because it's cool. Number two, this pretty deep inherent need for us humans to belong to some kind of tribe or community or group. And then number three, investment or speculation. And of course, these things can work, very much together, especially, with NFTs, you have kind of the financialization of these first two categories, right? And now, we have these three categories. What is actually the primary motivator? Well, according to some studies, it is perhaps unsurprisingly the profit motive, right? The need or want to make money. And so that begs the question, were NFTs good investments, right? I think we all know some stories of questionable decision-making when it comes to buying NFTs, either from ourselves or our friends. And as a category, when you look back over the last 6 months, for example, and you see the top 500, 600 collections, there are only about 29% of those that are profitable. And this changes kind of day to day, so this data is like 2 days old, but roughly speaking, this is what you get. And of course, that is in ETH terms. So when you account for this in USD, that number gets cut in half, basically, right? 12 months, you get slightly better performance, but still, I think the takeaway holds. And it's not just all collections. This also happens at the very top with kind of the blue chips of NFTs, not doing super hot at the moment. And another kind of interesting takeaway here is that in the top 10, you do get slightly better performance on average than the next 25 collections. But of course, this is post-fact, so a little bit hard to account for this before the fact. So if you're trying to pick NFT collections that do well, it is a little bit difficult. Now, I just want to point out that Kevin is not part of the next 25 or the first 10, but I had to fit him in somewhere in the presentation, so here he is. So NFT performance is unevenly distributed. This brings up the question, was it all a scam? And we would say no, because NFTs really served a pretty important purpose, and that is to bring in a lot of new users into the space and kind of revive this conversation around Web3 and why it's important to kind of control your assets and really have ownership over those assets, right? And you can see it in the data. When you look at the total active addresses on Ethereum as a whole over the period of, say, 2021, and then you compare that with the data from OpenSea in terms of active addresses and then total addresses, you see there's a pretty big amount of overlap. And just looking even more broader than that, there were actually 30 million wallets that traded NFTs total over 2021. So served a pretty big and important purpose, right? So we have kind of this data that shows us not a great investment, but at the same time, we're getting a lot more new users. And so it's a good time to kind of reflect and ask ourselves, what are NFTs good for? What is Web3 good for? And where do NFTs kind of play a role in bringing about Web3? And I think it's important to kind of go back to basics a little bit and think about what is Web3. This may be very familiar for some of you, but I think it's important to kind of go back to zero. We think Web3 is really about creating a trustless ownership layer of the internet, right? Creating an internet where you own your data, your assets, your identity. And historically, when we think about crypto, we talk about cryptocurrencies, right? Your fungible assets like Ethereum, Bitcoin, stablecoins, et cetera, things that govern the transfer of value. But a lot of the things that we own, a lot of the data that we interact with, the data that makes us us, is actually non-fungible, right? It refers to specific, unique data, and that's where NFTs come in as these records of ownership, these digital property rights over unique data. And what's really powerful with this is that we're kind of able to move from a model where it's account-based models of data, to a model where we're going to this universal ledger where we're all interacting on top of the same universal ledger, right? And for a brand, for example, what that means is that you can verify that a particular user owns asset X or has the right to Y. And that's incredibly powerful, and you don't need to make a request to another entity to get that data, right? You can verify that data independently yourself, and that obviously facilitates a lot of use cases, collaboration, et cetera. And so, now we're kind of in this transition period where we're going from NFTs that are purely products, they're outputs, to thinking about NFTs more as inputs into a whole range of new use cases, right? And that opens up a lot of possibilities. And what I want to do with the rest of my time here is kind of touch on a few of these possibilities that we're seeing, particularly with brands, right? For brands, there are really three core ways that we've seen NFTs be particularly useful. That's number one, building more invested communities. Number two, token-gated commerce. And number three, leveraging a new direct distribution channel. So a little bit more info on that, right? When we talk about number one here, with NFTs, you're now able to provide real ownership to your users, right? So your customers now become proper stakeholders. That means aligned incentives between brands and the users. And that means that you can really turn your customers into your most avid ambassadors by creating unique experiences and products that are purely designed for them. Shifting to token-gated commerce, we kind of continue this where not only can you gate and then unlock your e-commerce store and all the connected experiences around that to your community, but you can also make it accessible to other communities, right? Communities of complementary brands and other creators that you'd want to collaborate and work with. It's easier than ever now with NFTs to basically introduce this model where you can target and promote to a superset of my fans, being my brand's fans, and your fans together, right? Then finally, and these first two categories may seem a little bit skeuomorphic still, but what's super interesting and exciting to us is that a lot of what we're seeing being built in Web3 by brands and creators is also at the intersection of what we've been calling the metaverse, right? So this still fairly abstract and disjointed version of the metaverse. But the real promise for us, when we think about the metaverse, is that it is this new experience where your data is portable and persistent across the various different ways to access and experience the metaverse, right? And fundamentally, that's really what Web3 is about and what it is able to enable. And so for a brand, practically speaking, what that means is that you have this new distribution channel called the metaverse, and it's built on Web3 rails. And so that means that brands can really do two things. One is extend the life and the scope of their IP in this new channel in the format of NFTs. And number two, it means that in this world where everyone has wallets, you can reach and target customers based on the NFTs that they hold in their wallet, and you can do that directly and direct customer acquisition dollars into those wallets, right? It's a much more direct interaction with your end user. So, when we think about NFTs, what's interesting to us is it's the connector, the key that enables all of these different use cases. And a lot of brands are already kind of interacting with this and experimenting with this, and we at 3Mint are really enabling that by building this set of tools that you see here, right? So we at 3Mint are really building what we consider to be the building blocks for interacting and engaging with Web3 as a brand. And so if you are one of them, if you are a brand, we would love to talk to you. We have already worked with quite a few and have some really interesting case studies to share, so please do reach out. If you are a developer, please, again, reach out to me. We'd love to have you use our tools. And especially if you're super passionate about these kinds of tools and really having a part in creating the set of tools that are going to bring in or have the potential to bring in the next 100 million, the next billion users into Web3, then we would love to work with you. So please reach out to me at tom@3mint.io, also on Telegram, Tom Borgers. Please find me there. And thank you very much for listening.
Hey, thank you.
Yep.
You said we can reach and we can target and reach users based on NFTs. It's clearly hard to target, but how would you reach users? How do you reach wallets?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a really great question, and that's something that I think a lot of people are working on, like EPNS and others, in terms of how you actually message and notify wallets. I think that's what you're referring to. Today, the way that happens is still somewhat manual, right? Typically, you're filtering or trying to target a specific subset of wallets that say hold Bored Apes, right, or hold CryptoPunks. So that's fairly easy to filter and target. But then beyond that, the way that these things work today is typically you're working with that community in their discords to kind of let them know about this. But what we hope to do is work with folks like EPNS or XMTP, I think, to kind of leverage the infrastructure that they're building to automatically target. Now, this is very much in a Web3 context. The reality is that for Web2 brands, they're typically linking wallet addresses to emails or basically issuing wallets that are tied to emails already, right? So I think it depends a little bit what the context is. A lot of brands want to still control that relationship with the customer, and so they will require something like an email.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah. Alrighty, thank you very much.